Hello and welcome to the Walker Arts Center and the Walker Cinema. The Walker Arts Center and the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden are located on the contemporary, traditional, and ancestral homelands of the Dakota people. This site, which was once an expansive marshland and meadow, holds meeting for Dakota, Ojibwe, and indigenous people from additional Native nations who still and continue to live with us here today. By acknowledging this past, we recognize its role in the present and resolve to work towards reconciliation, reparation, and incorporating reflections of this history and how it intertwines with all we do and share with one another here as those who come to engage with the Walker. My name is Patricia Ledesma Vallon. I'm the Assistant Curator of Moving Image here at the Walker Arts Center. Tonight we're gathered here to watch Last Things, a 2023 film by the artist and filmmaker Deborah Stratman, joining us here today from Chicago. Stratman's work investigates issues of power, control, and belief, exploring how places, ideas, and society are intertwined. Manifestations of this in her work have considered topics such as suburbia, surveillance, sisterhood, faith, and national identity as critical points of inquiry. Stratman's perspectives have worked towards decentering the human experience to expand our understandings of the world. In Last Things, the film we're watching tonight, projected this evening on a 35mm print, Stratman considers this time perhaps the ultimate perceptible minutiae of the Earth, rocks, Earth's elemental parts that have survived millennia. Using macro and micro images of geological formations alongside testimony from scientists and writers, this work of experimental nonfiction invites us to see evolution as a process that extends beyond this human-centered perspective. Last Things weaves together geological microscopic images, references the earliest science fiction writers and documentarians, and words from novelists such as Clarice Lispector and their narrative introspection. Culminating in a post-human insight to sound, evolution, and our connections to these forms, Last Things is a penultimate gateway into reflections of life that invite us to shift away from the universal as grandiose and to consider the microcosm as an abundant source of reflection. Deborah's visit couldn't have happened or been possible without collaborators here tonight, so I'd also like to thank the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, Media Arts Department for their partnership on Deborah's visit. For more moving image programming here in the Walker Cinema, please also visit walkerart.org. And I also want to quickly plug another upcoming program on Thursday, May 7 here in the cinema with longtime video artist Cecilia Condit, which includes a screening of her widely viewed 1983 work, Possibly in Michigan, alongside more of her works, with a premiere of 2 new pieces made here recently in Minnesota. And now I'll introduce tonight's special guests. Deborah Stratman has exhibited internationally at venues, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Biennial, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, among others. Her films have been featured widely at festivals, including Sundance, True False, Toronto International Film Festival, and Rotterdam, again, among many others. She is the recipient of a Fulbright, a Guggenheim, and grants from Creative Capital and Wexner Center for the Arts. Following the film, Deborah will be joined in conversation with artist and filmmaker Andy Graydon. Graydon's work is concerned with natural and social ecologies, with sound and listening as creative practices. His projects frequently engage structures of music, such as the ensemble, the score, improvisation, and voice, and he has collaborated widely as a sound artist and composer. Graydon's work has also been presented at venues including the New Museum and Mass MoCA, among many others. Given the intersections of Deborah and Andy's practices, I'm excited to see where their conversation takes us, and I invite you all to please stick around after the film for an enriching discussion on Deborah's work in Last Things, and there will be an opportunity for a Q&A after as well. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and please join me in welcoming Deborah Stratman, who will say a few words before the film.
Hello. So nice to see everybody here, and thank you for coming out. It's a pleasure to screen something in this beautiful cinema. And thank you, Justin, for projecting and for just the invitation to be here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation with Andy afterwards. And I'm not going to say really much else. This film is called Last Things, but it's also about first things. So it's about extinction and also about evolution. Besides that, I'll just say have a nice trip, and I'll see you. It's a featurette, so I'll see you in less than an hour. Enjoy. I hope you had a good trip. Welcome back. Good to see you again.
Wow. We should just watch it again, right? I mean, let's just watch it again. It's like it's
Let's have another 4.5 billion years.
I was watching it. I thought, oh, that'd be so great to just make a 45-minute film and insist on seeing it twice.
I mean, some people might be down.
No, it'd be well.
I actually had a professor once who that was their jam. We would always watch everything twice, which I think it's always a different film. When you see it again.
A film class in which you watch The Devil probably 7 times during the course of the semester. Wow. Okay, so this is it's absolutely magnetic. This film's amazing. Just to put that on the table. Okay. It's also one that's like, it feels so unfair to have to start someplace with it, to have to ask a question to begin, because it feels like it's a piece that starts everywhere and then goes somewhere, or the reverse, or moves out into everything, in a way that a kind of a linear discussion of it, or an asking about how did it start, what was your first idea, feels kind of unfair to, but
I always got to start somewhere.
We got to start somewhere, and one of the things just on my mind that was kind of that I thought I might start with later is that this film is so incredibly timely. Getting to watch it right now. I mean, the Artemis mission is going to land again, like tomorrow or something like that.
Yeah. Right.
At the same time, we have like a national leader who's threatening the extinction of another culture, which just seems completely unfathomable, and it feels to me like this film sort of sits between the wonder and the horror in this kind of amazing way that feels, the phrase I wrote down was defiantly hopeful.
I like that.
And so, yeah.
Optimism, maybe it's the highest form of moral courage, but I don't know, that's what Shackleton said, right? So.
And look where that got him.
Yeah, look where that got him. I think defiant and hopeful, though, I think that's the right sort of psychoecology, or certainly from a ground of grief and some anxiety, for sure, just about the extinction that we're currently in, and that I'm certainly a part of, and just feeling like needing to find tools of how to pull out from that, not to absolve myself about being implicated, but just to have, as Marcia Bjornerud says, a more polytemporal way of thinking about the present, I guess, and the times we're embedded in. And I mean, geologists are so facile at it, about like seeing the glaciers as just like, that was just the other day, and just the way they're able to see space and immediately think about non-human timescales. But it was a good relief valve for me, and but also not one that patched everything up and made it better, but just one that helped. It's like, if you're grieving, you should mourn, and you need to find choral forms and shared forms and solo forms and all the forms for that. And I don't think it's just about grief. I think it's also about a celebration and like a vibrancy. Yeah.
Well, it feels like a piece of the acceptance of an extinction that has always already been ongoing. It's
right.
Like it's been this sort of it's a churning thing that is happening in existence, and I hear in the sort of tenor that the scientists take that when they say polytemporal worldview, we sit within it.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And they're able, because of their field and because of the kind of looking that they do, they sit within it with a certain intentional remove, and it feels like you're going ahead and grabbing it and bringing it close again.
Yeah, or when I can anyway. But also, I don't know, maybe it was partly also sort of not encouraging, that's the wrong word to use, but to learn of other mass extinctions that were so much worse. You're like, oh my God, the poor anaerobes, they're just totally wiped out when, the sort of sun eaters came along, and people who, not people, but whatever, the plant friends could process the sun and sort of exhale oxygen, and how much that destroyed what had been here, and sort of all the cycles of that was very illuminating. I guess I'd heard about, there's been other extinctions, but I hadn't realized to what degree things had been ground out. Yeah, I mean, you hear about the dinosaurs, but I hadn't known about all the others.
Well, of course, that makes me think about sort of existence and the act of creation that is always kind of in miniature when you're making a work right. that then goes out into the world and does its thing. So you begin with this one. I think it's from The Spectre, the first piece of narration that says, before there was the prehistory, before the prehistory, there was the never, and then there was the yes. Yeah. And I thought, oh yeah, that's actually the first question I want to ask. I want to start with the never and with the yes, because I think it's a truism that every film is impossible to make. It's an absolute impossibility to get it done until you see it and it manifests itself. And so I'm wondering, what was the first thing to percolate through in the idea process of thinking about this film, or sifting it, or what's the metaphor for making it?
There was a few yeses, I guess, but they were all for different films initially. So the first yes was reading the Rosny brothers, who are two Belgian brothers who wrote sci-fi before sci-fi was called sci-fi. And they wrote a number of novellas, two of which I sort of fused together in this film, Le Hypohuts and the Death of the Earth. And when I read it, I was so blown away by their willingness and gameness for casting the alien other as non-anthropic. I was like, oh, that is so cool. That it's, in one case, a sort of this sentient kind of mineral life form, and in the other, these sort of, I don't know what, I imagine them as sort of polyhedral shapes or cones and spheres that had these stars at their heart. So the very first thing I filmed were what I call the star people, which was my very janky, low-res sci-fi version of like, how could I film that? I don't know, but I can film people holding tetrahedral mirrors that reflect the sun that kind of obliterate their body. And then, because at that point I'm like, I'm going to make a sci-fi adaptation. I'm going to make a narrative film. I haven't done it, but I'm going to do it. Gosh dang it. And then I think what happened is I saw an exhibition at the Mineralsammlung in Vienna, at the Natural History Museum in Vienna, that talked about mineral evolution. And I was like, wait, what? I didn't know. I mean, I just didn't know. I just thought we always had that many minerals. There's a lot of minerals, and there's still a lot of minerals, and there they are. So this blew me away, that there was a few minerals, and then they started interacting with life and pressures and environments, and now we have a lot more. So, and they could come extinct. So then I thought, okay, I can't make the film I thought I was going to make, but I can still make a film. So that was like the second kind of yes. And then along that same time, just, I guess it was roughly COVID times and feeling like stuck in the studio and not able to make other things. So then it was a good time for research and going down various reading and viewing rabbit holes. And so discovering Marcia Bjornerud was the other yes. Discovering her books, and because it was COVID, like first I interviewed her, and then I just asked if I could start taking her classes, because she was like, a lot of us who teach started teaching online. So I just started taking her class, which was called Hell, History of Earth and Life. I was like, oh my God, I'm so down for this. And
it could have been Heal.
Yes, it could have. It's true. Yeah, it could have been Heal. But I was like, yes. So then had her, had her special delivery of, which is, she's such a good consolidator of, of what she knows. And so yeah, those things, it's not an easy answer, but it was like a constellation of things, and then beep, 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 like the right pieces were there to become then an engine for something more specific. That wasn't the adaptation And I don't know what this film is. It's I just say it's a featurette and leave it at that.
You
Yeah.
know, it's what's great is you don't have to know.
Yeah.
You brought it. You brought it. I love the idea that the star people were the first thing that
Yeah,
happened,
very, very first, like by some years.
because they feel so locked in and summative. They feel like the people to come, you know, the future public, or the thing that's going to happen next, like the next evolutionary thing. And they also bookend, like you were closed down to sort of just see the stars at the beginning, right? Aren't they standing there? But the stars are.
You see star, yes, you definitely
But
do
I can't see them. I only know at the end. That's
Yeah,
what they
you know
are.
at the end there are people holding those things, but I mean stars show up a lot throughout the film, but they're revealed as what they are closer towards the end. But yes, that sort of, I mean, already from the Rosny Bros short novellas that had this idea that the creatures, the hippohuts, when they die, they condense, become rocks that are cadavers. So I wasn't even thinking about this, but at one scene you see I thought about it. The film taught me. I didn't know it when I was putting it together. So there's the scene where you see the stars and you don't know there's people behind them yet, and then there's a cut to the Almenda's Cromlech, which is like a henge with stones. And I'm like, oh my God, they fit. They're like perfectly. It's like they've been killed and they've become these stones. So that's a very roundabout answer to saying like there was some of the solutions were already there, but it just took editing and honestly like watching and thinking about what's working that then I realized, oh.
Okay, so because I think about the star people, and then that started making me think about the way that people show up when they show up.
Yeah.
Outside of hands,
Right.
I went through and I watched it
Okay,
another
you're
time,
like,
and I was like, okay, wait. When do people arrive? And then there's star people, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting because there's the polytemporal worldview, but then there's one of my favorite shots is when I think it's that area that you're talking about. They're standing stones, and then there's a shot where 3 people walk through, and 2 people are blind, low vision, and it's just this peaceful moment that resets to my viewing what it means to be there, and what the relationship, like the tactile nature of being in a space. I believe that the soundtrack is fairly naturalistic at that point.
Yeah, it is.
It was and that felt very incredibly grounding, but also kind of twisting the notion of like the multiplicity of sensibility or of the sensorium. And so a multiplicity of temporalities, multiplicity of sort of senses, sense modalities. And I thought, oh, well, there's maybe we'll get to Calois, which makes me think of Henry Bergson, who thought that actually consciousness or thought was actually in the world, and we're just kind of antenna in a sense that pick it up. We're good at picking it up. And I thought, oh, well, maybe is there a sense of that there's just a multiplicity of consciousness that's distributed evenly around the world. So
Yeah, the trio was a very happy accident. I mean, I knew I wanted to film at the Cromlech, or not that one particularly, but that was the closest one to where I was at the time. And they were visitors. And it was, of course, totally mind-blowing and perfect because I was already thinking about how, Western sort of logical traditions of science and ontology and meaning-making is so visual and so data-based. And then an important thread of the film is thinking about other forms of knowing. Or like at one point, Val Masadian, who's the other narrator, who's not Marcia Bjornerud, who's a filmmaker herself, is quoting Lispector again about, I know about a lot of things I've never seen, and so do you. And so this kind of like valuation of knowledge forms that don't come necessarily from this, this Western tradition. Maybe it's not exclusively Western, but this prioritizing of vision as the kind of official voice of knowledge was one that I was hoping the film could push against. So other sensorial doors, other doors to your house besides the eyes. Even the shot of that you see. Well, there's a couple shots. There's one from a drawing by Ora White. What's her name? Ora Hitchcock. She was a geographer and geologist, an illustrator, and it's a drawing of a small person putting their hand on a really big rock, which really spoke to me. And then later in the film, there's a handprint, and which you see a lot in kind of early man writing upon walls and whatnot. And I had always thought of the hand as a kind of like Kilroy was here, like signed your name, and it's like your tag. But after making the film and thinking through the film and these other, what you brought up with the blind sensorium, just that the hand is also a sign of touch, and because it's a sign of touch, it's a sign of listening. So the hand is a sign of someone having listened, someone having been present and paid attention, but not maybe in a way that we're used to valorizing what paying attention is. And that was something else the film taught me, to see the hand in that way and to think, I'd already been thinking about touch a little bit in different ways because I'm so into sound, but
No, not at all. And well, it brings to mind a phrase that you used earlier at MCAD, which was that listening can be thought of as touch at a distance. That because it's also we're all in the medium where the sound happens, and therefore we're actually vibrating each other. It's a co-vibratory sort of encounter, right? So that totally resonates, as it were, to misuse a metaphor.
Yeah, it's true. There's not a lot of people. There's a few. There's some scientists looking at monitors. There's of course, the break dancers at the end. There's the blind people walking through. There's the star people. Yeah, some hands, but it's definitely low on the people front. I'm not anti-people at all. I'm totally pro people. But
it makes it really important when they show up.
Yeah, that's great.
So the dancers, when they're dancing on the stones, it just hits. It just it lands for that reason that we haven't gotten to.
Yeah.
We see manipulation.
Yes.
And then suddenly you see duet in this really...
It's duet, or what do you call it if it's 3 or 4 or 5? Quintet? Because it was I've shot a few of the things in the film handheld, like the butterflies and after life appears a complex dampness, which I'm like, oh, that's a nice way to call. But there's not a lot. That's the only sequence that's not only shot handheld, but all the editing is in camera, all of it. And so I say duet, quintet, whatever, because I'm shooting in response to, we're all having a conversation, a movement conversation and a time length of gesture conversation. And the reason that shot's where it is connected to the reason that the choral piece is at the end, because the film is so really big scale, much bigger than humans, and really small scale, much smaller than us, and so both of them are ways to bring it back to the body, to embodiment. The choral piece very much so, really lands you back, not just in your body, but in something you can produce, we can co-produce. And then dancing not just brings it back to the body, but to right now, because maybe everybody else has other versions of how can I be most present? But for me, it's when I'm dancing. And so I was like, that's, yes, sort of the field of what they're dancing on, but it's also let's consider the whole record. And let's also consider exactly right where the needle is in the groove right now. And those things together, not just one or the other. And also it's what I was bringing up before, the grief thing, and not trying to absolve, bringing it back to people, not to just be everything's all right, you can still go dancing, it's fine, but more actually we have agency, and we have agency right now, and this time scale is as valid as every other. It's not less valid, and it's not more valid.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking. So having you talk about editing in camera then makes me think about the polytemporal dancing that is editing, this montage. Yeah. And so I wanted to run something by you.
Okay.
So you talk about chondrites.
Yes, chondrites.
And then they're talking about the sub portions are called chondrules.
The chondrules are the little droplets within the chondrites. Yeah. So when you see the microscopic image, the little kind of circly blobs.
So within that asteroid, it's a pressing together of these chondrules, which each have a kind of an unassimilated, they haven't gone into solution. They're pressed together.
And they're also really freaking old. They're older than all the
Yeah.
planet. I mean, they were, that shot that happens really early on where it's like a sun and then a red cloud of dust spinning around it. That's sort of it's supposed to represent the early solar system before planets had congealed from stardust, dust basically. Chondrules are that dust, and they're just they've been compacted into these chondrites, but they're a memory pre-Earth memory. Like what Marsha's saying is like any rock that's been on the Earth, it's been subducted, it's been down, it's been crushed, it's molten, it's pushed back up, it's metamorphosed, whatever. It's forgotten its beginnings, but the chondrites land, and it's like, whoa, this was the solar system. So just local. I mean, it's a local kind of
Yeah, well, and then you have this shot of, I think it's polarized light as you're turning it around, and you're seeing it from these different, they announce themselves differently and they color up differently. And I thought, oh, a chondrule is a shot and the chondrite is your film. And they're pressed together in this way that you don't, because you also have, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the montage process for you, the editing process, because I think it's really interesting that you have a lot of a real a multiplicity of sources that are coming in, but you let them kind of be their own thing. Like Petra gets to be a moment in Petra.
Yeah, it's just another rock house.
But it's also echoing out and pointing into all these other things. And so you seem to not want to fully assimilate them the way that a fiction filmmaker would just make a background of something, like you'd shoot in the backlot to be Mars or something. Right. You want it to be what it is, and you also want it to resonate differently.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're making me think actually about hacked circuit, because that's the thing I love about a Foley stage is everything in there, it is what it is, and it's also this other thing. And I think that's the beauty of working with not just archival material, but even material that one has shot oneself, but so long ago and for a purpose you didn't know, that when you go back to it, or if you start using footage produced by others for other use for other intentions, it still carries that with it, and I love when things can have multiple identities, like their original identity and now this identity that it has as deployed in the film, and the distance between them that's always changing. So it's a pleasure to not everything to some degree gets caught up in the sort of homogenized river that is the flow of the film, but as much as possible to try to let things have their own, keep their own, like if they wanted to defect, they could. And they could just go back to being whatever they were before, and it would be fine. They didn't lose anything. I don't know.
Well, but you also
it's so weird to say that, but yeah.
But I was also noticing that you have this, what I would consider a little bit of a Stratman signature move, where you begin a kind of, now this leads into sound, but you have a kind of I want to say like a passage, an overture, especially of sound, and it builds, and then you go, nope.
Oh, I know,
Next.
It's a habit. It's true. I love pulling the rug out and like,
it's a reset. Yeah.
It's all silent now. Yeah, it's a reset. I think it's good it helps me as an audience goer when it happens that the roller coaster ride I'm on, this pleasure ride that is cinema, suddenly you're like, whoop, oh, what? I'm not there, and you're like conscious that you're hungry all of a sudden, or you're just conscious that you're viewing, and you're having to you thought you knew what this vehicle was, and you thought it was a hovercraft, and you just found out it's a camel or whatever you're riding on totally changed. Then you have to like, oh, actually this vehicle isn't what I thought it was. And so those moments are a pleasure to me as a viewer. And then I definitely like those resets as well. Kind of snaps or shakes back to a different kind of looking, which are different for every viewer, like what brings you back in and what you get lost in, or when you drift. And
it also, though, reminds me, reminds me of maybe the way that scientists look, because they're always allowing it to be possible that what they're going to see next is going to completely revise, like the geologists who discovered continental plate drift or whatever, right? Like
Right,
oh, wait a minute. Oh,
right.
that's what we've been looking at this whole time?
We got to
I'm not
rewrite
sure
the
about that,
novel.
right?
Yeah.
And then there's a huge like social human resistance to the worldview that's pointing towards.
Yeah.
But the cut is the view or the image resolves something else, and you have to be willing to chase that down.
Yeah. And then, and know that there's going to be another rug pull.
Continuity.
I mean, I think beyond just, letting their sources retain their identity as well as a new identity. I also don't ever want to be overly pedantic. I hate films that are like, no, you are looking at a chondrite, or like the object you just saw was a diatom. It looks like a solar panel. I'm like, people can... You either decide you make connections as a viewer. I mean, viewers they all have brains. They have heads. I see them in the audience. They all got heads on their shoulders. So I would just rather to leave it as a space of like associative thinking, productive associative thinking, instead of being like, okay, let me follow me and I'm going to hold your hand. We're walking this way. And that drives me crazy. So when shots, sometimes people they're annoyed. Like, how come you don't say what it is, what that was and what that was and what that was? And everything is very particular in this film, and it's in the order it is for really particular reasons. And the sources are all hyper particular, some of which you learn in the credits at the end. But there's also this way to see them that's not maybe tied to their origin story or, their use value. And I want to leave that open too, that there's other kind of rhymes and resonances that other meaning making modes that don't have to rely on like what their original definition was.
Well, and that brings up Roger Calois, who the work that I think you quote or in this is The Writing of the Stones. Stones.
Yeah, from The Writing of the Stones, yeah.
And that I know I've titled the work after some writing of his that was a universal syntax, and the idea there being, and also that you cut the geode open, and oh my goodness, all of this form that's in there.
Yeah.
This surely couldn't have been accidental. It couldn't have just arrived from nowhere. This must be pattern that has been architected by something, right? But he reflects on that by saying, well, what it actually illuminates is our will to use metaphor, to find pattern in everything. Isn't that interesting? The pattern is a projection mechanism within us, right? And I love that idea. I mean, I think it explains a lot of, like, you talked about the hand on the wall. A lot of art making is wanting to enact that pattern making out over the universe. Whether it's there, whether it's out there or
That's
inside,
right.
or in the
like evil
concourse
laugh, it
between
comes
those
in.
two things. Yeah.
The pattern making could be dark. Clearly, for some people, it's very dark. I
feel like we better talk about sound.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Be remiss if we didn't.
Sure.
The soundtrack's wonderful, amazing, full of incredible collaborators, and you've talked about sound as being, of course, and within the montage, allowing you to kind of be very as plastic as you can and not be not be pedantic, instead to be constantly creating something new, either a new space, or a lot of the time you talk about it in terms of space. In this case, it felt like sometimes it was materializing the objects.
Yeah.
It was helping to give them a kind of a weightiness. That they might feel like phantoms when you're observing them through a lens, but suddenly with that, the voicing of them became really important. I wonder if you could just talk about the process of choosing sound, of working.
Yeah, it's true. They maybe to some degree kind of anthropomorphize at times, or they give, also they have humor. I think sometimes the way the materialization of the sound, like in the section with the kind of close-ups near the beginning where you're seeing this, this kind of, archive of characters, a little, and each one has its own sound. And then also there's things later like, I think it's one of the protists, and it's like an oval-shaped protist, and it's just going across the screen, and it's like, I don't know. It has a sort of humor to it. I guess I'll say a couple very general things about the sound. The first is that overall, besides the human voices, the two that we hear that are voiceover, the film moves from a pretty heavily electronic score to an analog or a sort of a human-made. And yes, with the voices. And the section that I first brought up with the rocks, to give an example of like, how do you choose a sound? Because sometimes I know way in advance a certain sound or a composer or a section of a piece they've done that I really want to use. And other times it's through editing that I'm like, how could I help solve this scene? What kind of sound does it need? In the case of the cast of characters rock section, that was hearing a piece after I'd been starting to edit by Nick Collins, and he's a trumpeter, but an electronic trumpeter, so he processes the trumpet through electronics. And when I heard it, I'm like, this is perfect because it's electronic, but it has breath in it. So there's something, conceptually about that worked for me as the voice of the rocks, which of course isn't their voice, but it felt okay. And then, yes, I guess the other thing I'll say more generally, because it's such a key part of the soundtrack, are the voiceovers. And you never see either Val Messadian, who's the often French-speaking, but sometimes English, sort of very oracular voice, this, she's casting the world into being as she speaks it, and she has such a seductive tone. And I heard her speaking once at one of her films, and as soon as I heard her voice, I'm like, oh my God, I gotta ask that lady to do a voiceover someday because she has such a good voice. And when she sent me her recordings, I literally got goosebumps. I just like, okay, oh my God, she's so great. So there's that voice, which is, she's the magician. She's the conjurer. She's creating through what she's speaking, and it's very seductive. And then Marsha's she's basically in lecture mode, and it's a sort of flat northern Wisconsin accent. I mean, it's almost like a little grating after you've heard Valerie speaking. But I love how different their idioms are. I mean, even if you didn't know what they were saying, so much is communicated through the grain of their voice. So I loved working with those two because it paralleled for me wanting to equally work with sci-fi and sci-fact. Like there was these two poles that I wanted them to kind of repel each other, but that there's a force there. Like if you try to put two positive poles of a magnet together and they resist each other, they don't want to go together, but you sense the force between them. And so I liked their voices together for that reason, and because they echoed something about just the choosing of types of material that was feeding the film. But all the other minutiae of the soundtrack, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's hard to go too deep, but yeah, it's each sound is sort of different. And some is me creating sounds from nothing, like what? At the very beginning, one of the first shots, you see the crystal kind of growing on a black backdrop, and that's just like rubbing styrofoam together. So, sometimes it's me doing Foley and adding other sounds. Sometimes it's me sourcing other people's Foley that they made for other things and building sound that way. And then sometimes it's just straight up other musicians' scores / sound design. I mean, it's music, but in the context of the film, you don't always hear it as music necessarily. You might hear it more as texture or environment. I'm meandering now.
No, but I thought that community. I mean, you have a chorus. You have the chorus. Yeah. You have Brian Eno.
Brian. I know. I actually got permission for that
musician.
Too. Yes, thanks to a thread from Steve Rowell. Actually, a long thread.
Ankersmith, who will melt your ears with high frequencies. You've got Nicholas Collins, who works with breath. You've got Olivia Block, who you've worked with a lot before, in that kind of compositional, almost music concrete kind of style.
Yeah, I'm an equal opportunity listener.
No, it's fantastic. But also polytemporal, polyaural. I imagine there are questions from
what do you guys
universe.
What do you guys got
here? Now we're waiting for we've got a question right in here. We're waiting for a microphone to land on you. So
Yeah. Oh my God, that would be crazy
That'd
if
be
it
neat.
literally landed on you. I'd be like,
It comes down.
yeah. Are you okay?
Hi, it's me again.
Hello.
Whoa. Whoa. I had two questions, but I think you kind of answered one of them in regards to like the last scene of the break dancers. I feel like you like addressed your intentions, but I wanted to say that I really saw it as like kind of devastating and like fuck, like maybe we are the last things, but also like the attention to hands, like the fingers, like the way that we like extend out, like the microbial and like you know, the rocks that you had like as like reoccurring forms throughout the film, like that really
Yeah, that's kind
stayed
of
with me.
propagating.
Yes, yeah, just the extensions. But my other question, I feel like through the narrators you have in the film, I don't know if it's through like some of the quoting of Liz Spector, you kind of present like a heroine, like or a like a
Yes, it's true. I changed all the pronouns
yeah
to she and her. So that is one edit that I made in all the Rosny stories. It's always he, and I was like,
yeah.
It's a lady. I'm sorry, but it's a lady.
I really appreciated that, like, insistence, and also like it felt like a reoccurring character was emerging. Like she, like, I think one of the first lines is like she's devoting herself to like the studying of these beings, and then you see her go into the caves later and like really
Yeah. She
them.
becomes a lot of things. That's Hazel Barton. People have asked me if it's me, which I'm very proud of. Like, I don't have those skills, but if I did know how to, rappel and use ropes and stuff, I totally would. But Hazel Barton's a geoscientist, and she studies extremophiles. So, biota that live in caves that haven't been exposed to the atmosphere for millions of years, and that can exist in like really acid or just environments that life as we know it up here on the crust are not used to. So there are a lot of money's being poured into that right now, just for outer space studies and what kind of other beings might there be out there who can survive in very different planetary situations. But yes, Hazel, I think a lot of the she is it's mutable, and it's one person but not, because the she kind of migrates between a lot of different sources and stories. But for me, it's also enough to just have her be the thread, the one who's questing.
And then do you see it as like autobiographical, or like a more of an insert, or just a preference?
Someone recently I was talking to a filmmaker, I can't pronounce her last name, Eva Radyevich. She edited King Cole, and she's a filmmaker herself. I'm sorry, I'm totally proud. Anyway, we were talking about, I was thinking about how I had said, well, I'm going to get this out. I had said that I don't make autobiographical films, or that I don't make portrait films. And she was like, yes, you do. What do you think this is? This is a portrait film. And I was like, oh, whoa. She's kind of right. But I had never really thought about it that way before. But of course she's right, because it's like the editing. If you made a film about last things, it would be maybe a portrait of you. And I guess maybe it's a sort of a generic thing to say, but I hadn't. She opened it up to me to think about it that way, as a kind of self-portrait, but I never had before. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Oh yeah, your neighbor has a question.
Hi. That was a fantastic film. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. I'm really compelled by the sound design, especially the ending, having that chorus come in. I'd love to hear you talk about the choices behind that, between having so many voices, who the voices were, and kind of just why you had them in the piece.
Well, I had been kind of obsessed with shape note singing, which is the kind of singing they're doing. And shape note singing is there's not a choral leader. It's a sort of democratic form in the sense that the voices, the altos, the tenors, the bass, sopranos sit in groups and they all face in. And for each song you sing, the conductor swaps out from another member of the choir. So I like this. They're facing inward. I like that they're, every choir produces forms, right, with their voices, and but this particular style of singing was really interesting to me, and I had tried to be in shape note choirs and never really found the right mix, but at some point in my listening, I came across this particular song, and not just this particular song, but this particular song by this group sung at this moment, and I've heard a lot of iterations of Idumea or Iduema, but this one, I had the goosebumps again, and I was just like, whoa. So it was just, what? It's when the world grabs you and shakes you. I try to pay attention to when that happens. If I go out in the street and something is like grabs me and I hear something or I see something, I try to, stick that in my pocket and remember it. Same with Val Masedian's voice, or just things that really cut through, and you don't have to explain them to as you just feel them and you know them and you understand on some other level. So they just inspired me. It was from a shape note convention, so they'll do these conventions all over, really, but this one was in County Cork, I think, in Ireland. And they always do this first round of singing where they don't articulate the words. They just articulate syllables like fa, lo, sa, fa, sol, la, and others. And the scoring is just like triangles and squares and circles. It's supposed to be for people who don't know how to read music. I personally find it just as confusing as regular written music. So maybe not in my case, but yeah, it's just... I think the co-produced form was important to have there. And I just like the lyrics. Yeah, they seem essential. Thank you. Other folks? Yeah, there's a person over there. Oh, sorry. I'm not supposed to do that. No, you do. Okay. Yeah, that person had their hand up, but also this person. Maybe you guys could go 1, 2, like...
Thank you for being here. This is sort of in a similar vein to recent questions, but you've talked a little bit about some of the texts that are in the film. This is a bit selfish because The Hour of the Star is like a deeply important book for me, but I would love, it's not a question, but like where did The Hour of the Star come into Last Things? And it's like, I mean, it's such a strange book and like doesn't really have anything to do with rocks, but
No.
has everything to do with like everything.
Has everything to do with death and stars.
Yeah.
I mean, she vomits the star.
Yes,
It's like,
she does. Yeah, that's just talk about The Hour of the Star.
I mean, that book came in. That book I read years, and I mean, I'm a huge Lispector fan too. I feel like if you know Lispector, you're a fan, probably. So I'm one of the cult, I guess, who loves her writing, very generally speaking, and that book was just really meaningful to me. And this transmutation that's described in the book is very, very different, as you say, from what happens here. But that passage at the beginning of the film, which is from a kind of intro to the text, it's not from the text itself, as well as her vomiting up this star and the life that comes from a body, or, the universe being reinvented. I felt like all of that felt at a time of like grisly, lonely, abject, where that story goes is so intense, and that at the same time there's something so sublime. I don't know, it captured something important adjacent to what I was thinking about. For the most part, there's somebody out there who said what I'm trying to say better than I can say it, in terms of writing anyway. I mean, with films, I try to... the hope is that the film does a much better job of saying whatever the heck it is I'm trying to say than me sitting here talking about it, that it's going to be more articulate than I could. That's the hope, that it's speaking in its own indigenous language. So while I do cite a lot of writers and there's a lot of speech in the film, I also hope that there's another kind of language that is outside of sentence language that's doing some heavy lifting. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. Go Clarice. Yeah, everybody, if you haven't read Clarice Lispector, let's just give her a little shout out. Yeah. And then there was a person over here.
Thank you so much for sharing this work. It was beautiful. I also really enjoy like work that's based in research. And I feel like while I'm going through that process of researching, it always kind of unfolds into more questions and more philosophies. And I'm just wondering how the making of this film and the film itself now has shaped how you see or experience your worlds. Like when you walk into a room, when you travel, when you're in conversations with people, has the process of research and the film itself informed now how you experience your life in some way? Has it like informed some ethos?
Yeah, I never used to think of rocks as my ancestors, but now I do. And that's pretty major, I think. That was a major shift for me, just of worldview. I always thought they were cool. I always loved that you can carry this thing in your pocket that's just a total alien. It's from 3 million years ago, but it's so banal to put a rock in your pocket. This is a beautiful thing to me, that something can be so utterly alien and so vernacular and sort of, what does Perec say? Infraordinary. So not extraordinary. But somehow it's both. It's extraordinary because you're like, oh my God, that's a 2 billion-year-old rock. And at the same time, it's just like, whatever, just this rock I got in my pocket. So I like the ancestor thing. I mean, yeah, I definitely learned. Like I said, I didn't know about mineral evolution, and I don't know that it's not like, I didn't necessarily feel any better about the extinction we're in the middle of and like our role in it. I still feel like, oh God, it's just so fucked up right now. And on a ecological level, and also I'm just so sick of all the whatever. I'm just sick of baby men. Chest thumping baby men ruling. I'm sorry. I'm so done. Done. I hope this is, their death rattle. But somehow I don't think it's the case. But it's frustrating. It's super frustrating to just have like these cycles of thinking that just always go back to capital and like, can we think post-capital? I hope so. I haven't yet figured it out, but maybe that's the next kind of, is that possible, and what does that look like? Yeah. Thanks for your question, though. Yeah. I love a good research hunt, though. It's hard to turn it off, actually. Sometimes you just got to be like, we're cutting you off. You can't keep researching. You have to stop. If there's anybody in the back, I totally can't see because it's you're in the shadow, so you'll have to shout.
First of all, that was absolutely beautiful. I loved it. I love the shot of like that gloved hand holding that rock that was kind of pyramid shaped. It was like just look at this
isn't that a
rock
beauty?
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you right there. I love that shot.
I think the fact that like you see rocks and you found all this inspiration in them, when like you said, like the idea of just a rock in your pocket, like you don't really think about it, but there is kind of so much to draw from it. Like, absolutely. This movie was making me think a lot about Uncut Gems. And
oh God, yeah. Oh, that sequence when you go back in time.
Exactly, the opening sequence, and also like that's a movie about life on the verge of death, thematically tied to a rock, and then this is a movie about rocks thematically tied to life on the verge of death. And so I was just wondering, like, if you like that movie.
Oh my God, double hitter. We should totally. That's a great idea. I love this. I would so be into that. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, the I love thinking. But thank you for your kind words, and I'm glad it was transforming in some way. That's nice when film can do that. Yeah, that's cool. Oh, I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. You were talking about the tetrahedron, the glove. I don't know, though. I lost it. Whatever thought I had. It's like, gone out there now.
Well, all those shots of holding a crystal, turning it around, that also get this other sound treatment, so that the moving of them is
So that's
something
kind of-
completely different.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's like, this thing, it's not totally a
Maybe
cadaver.
it's an ancestor.
Yes, yeah. It's got something there. Yeah, and it does, when it slices it, you are like, oh. And when the guy's looking in the drawers, like after the radioactive time, and those are all also kind of making the rocks sound, I mean, it's all just sort of goofy Foley, but so that they have a little bit of something to them. They got a little zip.
One more?
Yeah. Rocks. There's a person. You're at the threshold of darkness. Yeah.
Is this better?
Yes. Now I see your head. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyway, I'm curious, when you were doing your research for this film, you mentioned, there's mention of star people or people of light, and given the film's focus on minerals, I'm curious if you did any research into the pineal gland, which contains both calcite microcrystals, which also happen to be bioluminescent.
I didn't personally, but a friend / Sukhdev Sandhu, who runs the Colloquium for Unpopular Culture in New York, when we were collaborating on a text that went was developed together with the film on some level, and he mentioned the pineal gland to me, but he did not mention the bioluminescence. This is a trip. I'm just learning about, but he was thinking a lot, definitely about the stones that the body forms. Everything from kidney stones to just like our bones, and but I didn't know about the. Can you say any more about the gland?
It also happens to be where DMT is produced.
Oh, crazy! Oh my God!
If we're going to talk about the history of everything, and
wow, now that you see a reason for all the, the.
It's all there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I make this film is definitely trippy. Yeah. But not. I wasn't thinking about the pineal gland, but I think it's psychedelic for sure. It has psychedelic things about it, where not just the psychedelia of you kind of merge with what's not you psychedelia, but like weird color processing, and it lets things become sort of visually hyperbolic in ways we're not used to.
Yeah. Thank
you. That's true. I'm definitely gonna read up. Yeah. Yes, the bodies, our own bones, and the ones we want and the ones we don't. There.
That sounds like the title of the next film.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
It happened here.
Yeah, okay. Well, Andy, thank you so much for helping
Deborah, thank
guide
you
the
for bringing this film
conversation.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you for spending this time with us. You've been so generous.
Yeah.
Deborah Stratman, everyone.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Andy Graydon, everyone. And thank you guys. It's yours now. That's the way films work. It's up here. So